Now it's time for our special guest. It's a great honor to introduce Agnes Callamard, the new Secretary General of the International Secretariat. Dr. Callamard was appointed Secretary General in March 2021, having recently been the United Nations Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions. In that role, she led groundbreaking investigations, including into the murder of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Dr. Callamard has built a highly distinguished career in international human rights and humanitarian sectors, working across NGOs, academia, and the United Nations. Alongside her role as a United Nations independent human rights expert, she held the role of Director of the Global Freedom of Expression Project at Columbia University. Previously, she has also been the Executive Director of the Freedom of Expression organization, Article 19, and was the founder and Executive Director of HAP International, the Humanitarian Accountability Partnership. So she has led human rights investigations in more than 30 countries and published extensively on human rights, women's rights, freedom of expression, refugee movements, and the methodology of human rights investigations. So I'm going to be asking some questions of Agnes, and then we'll open the floor to questions from members. If you would like to ask a question, please click on the chat icon and type away, and then those will be fed through to me for asking later on. So, hello Agnes, and welcome to the AI UK AGM. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, the first question then, tell us a bit about your background and what drives your passion for human rights.
Thank you. Thank you for starting with such a light introspective question. You know, I don't think it's an hazard that I ended up doing human rights. I'm coming from a family of people who have been very much devoted to social justice or to fighting for what they believe in. My grandfather on my mother's side joined the French army when he was 17 years old and fought in the First World War. He then joined the Resistance during the Second World War and was executed by the Nazi on the final day of the war on the 15th of August 1944. I grew up in an environment where we celebrated his courage and his commitment. And every year on the 15th of August, I will go to a place where we will remember him, or my family will remember him, and others from the French resistance who had fought for their values, for their love for their country, and so on. My mother was a school teacher and very, very committed to the protection of children, to state education, and she was working in a range of non-profit organizations around poverty, around sexual violence against children, French language teaching for newly arrived migrants. So, you know, that was my environment. Of course, I took my own road, and my own road was outside my community. My background, the people in my family had really fought within their community for social justice. I had a desire to see the world, but to continue fighting for social justice. So that took me around the world in many places. My primary commitment was around anti-racism. I spent the first, from my 15 years old to, I will say, 28 years old, really focusing on anti-racism, on refugees and migrant issue. When my personal journey led me to a university in the United States, which is one of the oldest African-American university, called Howard University, where I spent 3 years there. I was a white person in a very predominantly African-American environment, that was a formative, an extremely important experience about, even though it was understanding racism and anti-racism from the standpoint of the US history, it was nevertheless extraordinarily important for me. And I'm mentioning that to you because I know that anti-racism is such a big concern for all of us within the Amnesty movement. And I do hope I can build on my experience when I was young, fighting racism, fighting apartheid, because it is still so relevant, even though the shape of it may have changed. What sustained racism, what sustained apartheid is still very much in place, and that's what we need to fight against. Anyway, that's a little overview from racism and refugees. I went more squarely into human rights work at Amnesty. I became in that journey. I became a feminist, and I'm still a feminist. I've broadened my outlook over human rights, including in latest iteration, which was freedom of expression and then arbitrary killing. So a broad range of interest intellectually, but also at the guts level. That's what made me. And I'm very glad to be back with Amnesty.
Well, I know we would all love to welcome you to the role, and it's incredibly inspiring to hear your journey and what a commitment to social justice you've inherited from your predecessors. So the second question, what is your analysis of the state of human rights in the world today? And what do you think Amnesty needs to do differently to make a positive change?
Look, that's a tough question, and it's a very big question for the time we have. But let me just maybe make 2 or 3 points about the environment. The human rights environment is in many ways unprecedented in the number of challenges and threats that we are confronting. We are looking at historical pressures, from climate change to inequality, to demographic issues, and so on, including the Industrial Revolution that we are all in the midst of at the moment, which we don't fully comprehend. Those historical forces began before this period and will go on for many more years, if not decades. And they create an environment that is extremely conflictual, and which convey many violations. Climate change is existentialist in its outcome and in its current implication as a very dramatic human rights violations. So is the long-standing inequality, which has been increasing over the last 10 years within states and between states, very much a product of the 2008 austerity measures. That too has many human rights implications. So that's the historical panorama. Currently, within our historical current period, we are also confronting the reshaping of the international system, the fight between China and the United States, with also Russia playing a disrupting role. That is a major source of current conflict. It's a source of development which carry with them human rights implications, the armament race, territorial control, new form of colonization of the planet, of the space, proxy conflict. I mean, all of those are part and parcel of our environment. So it is superimposed over those historical pressure. This is why I'm always starting that conversation by insisting on the fact that it is an extraordinarily difficult environment. the industrial revolution, the technology revolution adds to the instability of the system. It is transforming almost every aspect of our societies, and it will transform what it means to be human through robotic, through other form of research into biology and so on. So it is a complex and extremely challenging environment. What does it mean for Amnesty? It means first and foremost that we need to be bold. It is an environment which demands of us that we do not always or only resist, because resist will never be enough, given the pace of changes that we are witnessing. It is an environment that demands of us that we go on the offensive. Yes, some people are going to say, how can we go on the offensive when everything is so up in the air and so on and so forth? It's not tactically sound to do that. I will disagree. I think that if we do not participate to the reimagination of the world we want to be in, we're going to lose. We're going to lose because others are doing it for us, and resisting the change is not going to work. It's not going to be enough. We need to be proactive. We need to be imagining the world we want for our children, which means that in our work now, in our intervention, human rights intervention now, we need to think of the future. Everything we do now will have dramatic implications for the kids and for the grandchildren. It means being future-oriented, having in mind what's on the horizon. Our intervention on technology, huge implications for our grandchildren, if not just our children. The information technology is changing the nature of work, just to take basic things, through artificial intelligence. And you seem to be very, very young, so you probably will experience that. We need to be fully aware of that. And that means projecting ourselves. Where is AI, artificial intelligence, taking us? That kind of mindset must become almost natural for Amnesty in such a context of rapid transformation. And then we need to reach out. We need to reach out. We cannot do everything ourselves. We need to, in order to meet the scale and the pace of change, there are many other groups, individuals we need to stand by, shoulder to shoulder. As an organization, we're fairly heavy. We're not always the fastest kid on the block, but we do have a formidable platform. What it means is that we need to stand by the side of those who are reinventing civic space. We need to be standing side by side with Black Lives Matter, with Me Too movement, and with the youth. The youth is a formidable inventor of the world. And of course, we need to be there to protect them, to protect young human rights defenders. But in my view, we have far more to learn from them. And we really need to find a way of including the invention of the youth. And, the fact that they think far more outside the box than elderly people like me or older people like me. So, reaching out, having a real commitment to partnership in a deep way, that is going to be essential. And I have to say, many of those things are reflected in the new strategic framework. So I'm very pleased to be joining Amnesty at a time where it is, very forcefully looking at regaining control of civic space, fighting inequality in all its dimensions, including as a result of climate disruption and transformation, and partnership, which is so central to that new strategic framework.
So I think in many respects, it follows on from what Tom was telling us earlier about the importance of people power, really sort of harnessing the ideas and power of activists, particularly at the grassroots level. But certainly we're not going to be short of work as an organization over the next years and decades. So the third question then, What do you think is the role of a big section like Amnesty UK within the Amnesty global movement? And what do you see as the role of Amnesty UK activists in making change happen globally, as well as in the UK?
Well, you know, in many ways, the role of Amnesty UK is in keeping with its size, which is generosity. You know, it's one of the drivers for our capacity to work. It's a fantastic source of funding for for sections around the world and for the International Secretariat. So, you know, size matters a great deal here, and the generosity of the UK section in providing the fuel for our intervention is, you know, is something that we are all very indebted to. But it's not, of course, the only thing. I think, given the size and the history of the UK section, and more generally human rights in the British culture, I think we would expect the UK section to really lead in the boldness, because you can afford to be bold. You can afford to think outside the box. You can afford to invest into new forms of membership, to invest into new type of activism, to really push the boundaries. I'm not saying at all that this can only come from section that has the financial might, but those that do have the financial might must take responsibility for using that financial might to test out for the others and to try out new ways of thinking, and to push us to be more adventurous and more courageous in how we work. I would, of course, expect the activists of the UK section to focus on what's happening in their country, because the Great Britain is a formidable international player, even outside the European Union, or maybe even more so now. And therefore, not only what's happening inside the country, but what this government does outside has major implications. So the role of the British members of AI UK is extremely important for Amnesty campaign everywhere, and for Amnesty vision. You know, like I know that this weekend we're trying to do something with the UK section vis-a-vis Nepal, because of the relationship between the UK and Nepal, and Nepal is going through hell right now because of COVID. It's really going through hell. So, you know, insisting, for instance, on that the members of AI UK demand of their government that they support, invest, and provide vaccine to the Nepalese people. That's the kind of international solidarity that only the UK section can deliver because of that relationship with Nepal. But of course, I would also expect them to work a bit on Great Britain itself. As you know, the evolution there is of concern, as it is throughout Europe, in fact. You know, fighting back the attacks against the Human Rights Act, fighting back the shrinking of civic space in the UK. That is important for the country, it's important for Europe, it's important for the world. So I think you have your work cut out, to be honest.
It certainly sounds like it. And I think one of the important things that we can do, as you've touched on, is expressing that solidarity from the UK with the international movement, and working out ways that we here can use our strong position, as Meredith outlined, to support the work of activists across the Amnesty movement around the globe. So the last of our prepared questions is that we've been talking this morning, particularly from the reports of our acting board chair and interim CEO, about the work Amnesty UK must do to become actively anti-racist in how we work and in the external work that we do. So I'd like to ask, what are the issues of racism and wider inequality and discrimination that you see now within the International Secretariat and the global movement? And what thinking have you done so far on how to decolonize Amnesty and to build an inclusive and actively anti-racist movement?
Thank you. So anti-racism and anti-sexism, feminist leadership are my priorities as the Secretary General, among a few others. I've already explained my personal commitment to those issues. There are clear reasons as to why Amnesty must do all it can to address racism within its ranks. I see racism and the expression of racism within the movement as an existentialist threat for Amnesty International. We will not survive accusations of racism. We cannot survive instances of racism because they, well, at a deep level, they completely undo who we are as, or who we should be as an organization. They demonstrate how little cultural change we have been able to undertake within our own organization. And that really is a slap. I think it should be a slap for all of us. More at a global level, you in the UK section know very well that any kind of accusation of racism is a major threat to our ability to speak, to our ability to influence, to the way we are perceived. And it is going to be used over and over again against us, as it should, although some of the instrumentalization that will be made of those accusations are really done by people who are just seeking to weaken the human rights work more generally. But it is a threat, and that's where we need to begin that journey. We cannot survive racism as a human rights organization, period. Now, how are we going to do that? How are we going to be an anti-racist organization? I think is not a straightforward journey. It is not an easy one, but it is one that we must take resolutely, with commitment and with resources. What does that mean? It means, A, we need to address it within our own rank, meaning for me, the Secretariat, for you, the section, looking at policies, recruitment, promotion, complaint mechanism, diversity of staff, how microaggressions and how we respond to that as opposed to critical incident. All of those things are, must be a priority, as it is at the International Secretariat now, and I can tell you more what we have done. It must be done within the Secretariat, it must be done within the each and every section. And then it must be done within the movement. What do I mean here? The movement of Amnesty International is 60 years old. It is the product of an historical moment. It is a product of people, and it embodies commitment and values, some of which may not be the values that we want to see in our movement. There is no doubt that in the decision-making process of the movement, in the structures of the movement, in the policies of the movement, in the mechanisms that carry us forward, in the external policies as well as internal policies. We have embedded what you have referred to as maybe colonial values. And that will need to be named, that will need to be researched, that will need to be unrooted. That is, I think, what is going to be the most complex part of it. I think I'm sure within the UK sections, you are already taking steps. I'm certainly taking steps, and there is a fantastic energy within the International Secretariat on the part of staff and management to really address racism. And we've done a range of things, and we're now putting together our action plan for each and every one of the programs. So I'm really very excited by the conversation we've had and by the energy around it. It's complex, it's challenging, it's demanding that we acknowledge privilege, that we acknowledge unconscious biases, that we're prepared to be called out for those. So it's not going to be a smooth road. I know that but we've got to do it. How we tackle the movement, that's going to be a very interesting process. It's one that we must take. It's one that people are starting to name, starting to talk about decolonizing Amnesty, as you've done. If we are all prepared to go on that journey, if we are prepared to acknowledge that some have more power than others, and that there is no reason for that, really, that it needs to be named, we need to be aware of it, we need to understand how to tackle it. All of those things will need leadership. I know that there is already in the movement a lot of leadership around it. The UK section, US section, Canada section are doing a lot. Mexico is doing a lot. So I think I'm optimistic, but it's not going to be easy. But I'm optimistic that we will do it, and that I hope that within 4 or 5 years, Amnesty can claim we've done a lot. We are almost anti-racist, and we'll continue to do that.
As you noted in your first answer, racism in whatever form it takes is a spectre that we really need to challenge and root out. And I think, as you said just now, it's important that we as a movement become and be seen to become actively anti-racist. So I'm certainly very heartened to hear your commitment to that as you take up the role. Unfortunately, we had planned to ask for questions from the floor, but we're running short for time in that respect.
Yes, sorry.
I've been asked if it would be possible for us to submit the questions to you, and we could answer them offline and then can distribute the answers to members, because I know it would be incredibly rewarding for them to be able to.
I am so sorry that I spoke so much. Sorry. Sorry to everyone online. I'm really sorry.
No, well, it's been incredibly.
Of course. Send me the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and no need to apologize for talking so much. It's been wonderful to hear from you about your journeys and your commitment to the role. And yeah, just thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's been incredibly heartening to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you to everyone that I cannot see, but have a lovely AGM. And I'm looking forward to working with you in the years to come. And please, my virtual door is open. So send me questions.